Good afternoon to you. Mark Sutton with HurricaneTrack.com here. It is Monday, the 5th day of December 2022, and we're back. We got the hurricane outlook and discussion again here. Why? Because the National Hurricane Center has outlined this area out over the open subtropical Atlantic. Invest area 99L. Of course, it would be 99L. Maybe this will be the last one. Remember, we go 90 through 99 with these invest numbers, so we're ending here with 99L, perhaps. And if it does get named, it will be Owen, and we'll see. It's got a pretty good chance there, I do believe, over the next few days of a subtropical storm formation possibility here out over the open Atlantic. No worries, this will not affect land. Could generate some swells that could impact land areas, and it's certainly going to be a really big, powerful open ocean storm, and that's going to be of interest to marine and commercial vessels out there. So yes, let's take a look at what we've got, shall we? First of all, here's a tweet here from Tyler. You guys remember Tyler? I've talked about him in the last few years. I was just checking up on him by moving my mouse over his name over on Twitter here, and he's now with the National Weather Service. How about that? Excellent. He's down in New Orleans, I do believe, and good for him. That's pretty awesome. I'll have to go visit him sometime when I'm down along the Gulf Coast. We've referenced Tyler's tweets and analyses over the years, and now he's with the Weather Service, I'm assuming down there in Slidell, New Orleans area. Anyhow, here's what Tyler's saying regarding this system. The calendar is saying, of course, it's December, but a non-tropical area of low pressure now, which of course is Invest 99L, could become a subtropical storm, and of course the name would be Owen, before reaching cooler waters. The favorable jet dynamics coupled with above normal sea surface temperatures, hey, there's those sea surface temperatures coming into play again, could aid in the STCG. What on earth is that, you might ask? Subtropical cyclogenesis is the answer, as warm seclusion occurs over the next 48 hours. So to boil all that down into plain English, we have a non-tropical area of low pressure. It's not one of these tropical waves that came along with a lot of heat and a lot of energy with it. It's a non-tropical area. It's a disturbance out there, some cold air interacting with the very warm water temperatures, cold air aloft. There's a lot of instability, a favorable jet stream pattern out there overall. Just the dynamics of it are creating this storm over water temperatures that would allow for the potential of a little bit more concentrated area of convection and wind field. The pressures are going to drop significantly, so it could meet the criteria of what we call a subtropical storm, kind of falling in between the cracks there of just a regular mid-latitude ocean storm and a full-on Atlantic hurricane or something like that. This is kind of in the middle. And another really easy way to think of it, hybrid. And, you know, I'm not in charge of the Weather Service and the Hurricane Center and all that. Maybe just hybrid would have done it in terms of a name, hybrid storm, but they call them subtropical. And this could get that way over the next few days. Here's what the Hurricane Center says about it. Again, it's a large area of low pressure. Way out there in the open Atlantic, environmental conditions do appear conducive for it to acquire some subtropical characteristics. I'm going to show you in a minute that the model guidance really likes it, especially the GFS. And it's going to kind of drift around out there, and then eventually it'll move over cooler waters. But as I'm going to show you, it is really going to crank up and become quite the powerful storm, no matter what it is called. Remember, we talked about that often this past hurricane season. Labels help us as mere humans keep up with things. We put sticky notes on stuff in the office. We label things. We call our children names. We name them. We call them names. Yes, that's funny. We do, those of us that are parents, but we give people names. You get it. It's all about classification and just assigning order into this otherwise chaotic world that we have. And it works the same way in meteorology as it does in all science, all right? So the label of subtropical, it's just a classification. It is going to be a very strong and impactful over-the-ocean storm system. And again, for marine interest out there, this could be quite the big deal. And we'll have to see what kind of swells it is able to generate once that wind field does get established. So here it is right there on the satellite animation, courtesy of Tropical Tidbits, sitting out there over the subtropical Atlantic. And Yeah, it's trying. It's got some deep thunderstorm activity with it, but it's spread out. It's not concentrated like we would see with a true tropical system. And look at this. There's a little area of thunderstorms well to the south and west of the Baja. No mention of that from the Hurricane Center. I guess it's not necessary, but it is interesting to see some organized convection kind of hanging out there. There's another little puff of clouds there. But the hurricane season is technically over, at least from a calendar perspective. Yet you do sometimes get these rogue systems that develop from non-tropical sources over the warm waters here. And the water temperatures certainly are warm. This is the analysis. Our feature is located out here roughly in this region. And water temperatures right now where it's located are warm enough overall. That 26 Celsius line is important. That's about 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So it does have an area to work with now over the next few days where the water temperatures could allow for some more development. And then, speaking of that, this is Zach Covey, and I always like to show you who I'm referencing here. Zach is a hurricane specialist, works at Spectrum News, Florida State alumnus, so Zach also knows what he is talking about. Important that we're citing intelligent people. So, Invest 99L looking nice this morning, certainly not bad for December. And the multi-model consensus is that this storm will likely have some tropical and subtropical characteristics over the course of the next few days. Of course, those are Zach's opinions on that matter. The Hurricane Center does not mention tropical, but that doesn't preclude it. You know, Zach is seeing some interesting things, and one of those, this helps to bolster what he's saying here. This is the phase diagram chart. Before you just like shut the video off because this is too much to absorb, it's fairly easy to understand once you know what you're looking at, and I'll try to explain it the best I can. So this is sort of your map over here, this inset right here. Let's use a color that pops out better, shall we? Purple, maybe? That'll work well, even though there's purple in there. So let's try again, Mark. Let's use red, even though red's in there too. Red is our 26 Celsius line right there. And then these other letters and whatnot, this is where it is now. This is where it is forecast to be by the multi-model guidance, all right? So this is the track that the different guidance is suggesting kind of milling around over the next few days. So it's in an area of favorable sea surface temperatures now and for the next day or so, but then, as it's mentioned by the Hurricane Center, it'll move out of those favorable sea surface temperature profiles, all right? Then we look over to the actual structure of the system, and the easiest way to follow this is where it is now. The Z is kind of buried in here. This is where it ends up. And in between all of that, it does get over into the deep warm core phase. This is similar to what we call a Venn diagram. You remember that from school days? It's just similar to it, where they don't really overlap at all, and Venn diagrams can have some overlap. But this is a phase diagram showing us the different phases in the structure of the cyclone. And this is automatically generated on various websites that are out there. I think Zach gets this one out of FSU, and I think they're one of the ones that produce these. They do a great job with it. And it just shows us the different structure of the system. And a lot of times, your big-time winter storms, they'll be here in the deep cold core. And then your hurricanes are going to be over here in your deep warm core. These hybrid systems, and that's why they're hybrids, like a mutt, right? They are mixed of similar characteristics from your deep cold cores and your deep warm cores, and that's why you get this sort of hybrid, also known as subtropical storm developments. All right, so it does have a little bit of time there, according to the multi-model consensus, where it could get into this moderately warm core, deep warm core to moderate warm core. Well, not quite deep, but warm core. That's the point overall, from shallow where it ends up. And what does that mean? Just real quick, instead of having deep thunderstorms and the whole column is nice and warm, it could do that a little bit on a moderate scale. It'll end up being more of a shallow system where the convection and the warm layer is just not that deep in the atmosphere. Just an interesting scientific way to break this down instead of just looking at model guidance, you know, the maps themselves. This is more of an analysis of the structure of the system. So I appreciate Zach tweeting that. Speaking of models and whatnot, this is what it does look like here on the GFS. This is our system basically right now as I'm putting this video together. The overall vorticity signature of it spread out, which is exactly what we would expect to see with a non-tropical system. Our tropical systems, remember, all the way back to hurricane season, what Ian looked like, what Martin looked like, and others, Nicole even, once it bundled that energy better, they are more concentrated. This is still spread out. However, we move this out even to 24 hours, it does attempt to develop a little bit more of a concentrated area of energy there. Still having the model's got to resolve this too, but overall, once we get out to about days 3 to 4, it does try to consolidate there, maybe becoming a subtropical storm out over the open Atlantic there, and the name would be Owen. If it does, that's the structure of it. Still pretty loosely defined overall. Very large, yes, and it ends up, let's just go on out to day 5. Where does this end up? Well, going out past 96 to finally 120. So at 120 hours, the overall influence here at the lower part of the atmosphere, the lower 5,000 feet, 850 millibars, that is enormous. Just a huge wind field over the Atlantic Ocean there. If I try to draw an equivalent area, something like that, right? It's pretty close. Over the eastern U.S., you see how large that would be? And we get those from time to time with these giant mid-latitude storm systems that come out into the lower 48. But this is going to be over the ocean, and this is what it looks like down at the surface. Yes, that says 954. And look at the isobars in here, your lines of equal pressure. That is a lot of wind, and so this is really going to be a huge ocean storm, and any maritime interest out there, your meteorological services are going to want to watch this very closely, and ships are going to want to avoid this. We'll talk about it more probably on Wednesday, just to revisit this and see how it's doing, and I'll pull up some wave guidance information, current and forecast, and we're going to see some really big wave action out there, and maybe even try to pull up some of that ship traffic, similar to what you see on FlightAware. They do the same thing for marine traffic as well. So interesting novelty, not going to affect land directly. Probably, I mean, again, there could be some swells that come out of this, and, you know, looking at it now, I kind of revise that statement that it will generate swells, and I bet a lot of that energy will end up in Atlantic Canada. I mean, if you think about it, this is not that far away, that huge wind field from Newfoundland over here and even Nova Scotia. So yes, this will probably generate some huge waves propagating out in the open Atlantic, and that'll be an interesting, in sort of a concerning way, thing to watch over the next few days, especially, of course, for our maritime interests. All right, moving on along, it is the off season, not hurricane season any longer, at least on a man-made calendar. But we do look at lower 48 weather, and we're always on the lookout for these big impact storms or anything that's just beneficial. Weather doesn't always have to be big impact and doom and gloom and exciting and just whatever. Sometimes it can just rain and it can just snow, and it's okay. You know what I'm saying? There's no hype attached to it. And today's map, at least the lower 48 watches and warnings map, is just that. There are some winter storm watches and some weather advisories. I think that's what those purples show. Let's click on it. Hey, that's what the map's for. You click on Montana up here, if it'll respond. And what do we got? It is a winter weather advisory. So even I was overdoing it there. It's not a winter storm watch. It is a winter weather advisory for a good deal of Montana. And I guess that's the same thing here over in parts of Nevada. Yep, those purples. I got to remember all these different colors. The Weather Service has got a bunch of them. Winter weather advisories, so no major storm problems right now, but parts of the Rockies here, just to show you, well, that's kind of, what do you want to call it, exciting, or certainly something that needs to be paid attention to. That blue color there, that very sharp blue color, what is that, like cyan? That's an avalanche warning, and yes, in the high country of Colorado from all the snow they've received, that could be a big problem. Let me go back to the main map real quick. I want to point something out. In the good news department, there is a lot of snowpack out in the west now already, and we're starting off very like on the positive side. The snowpack is water. Of course, it's frozen, right? And that will last through the winter months. Getting into spring, it melts away, and that turns into freshwater sources for the various rivers and streams and the whole ecosystem, including us people out in the west. So this is actually a very good thing to see. Yes, your avalanche warnings and any dangerous driving conditions when there are winter storms or too much snow can be problematic, but overall, when you see that kind of snowpack this early, it is a good thing. Now, if it can persist and accumulate and just get to be more, which I think it will, I'm going to show you that here in the model guidance, we could be looking at a pretty good year here, ending 2022 into 23 in terms of the hydrologic situation for our western population, animals and man included. Seriously, it's a good thing. So moving on out into the forecast period here, look out west there. Yes, storm system after storm system comes in off the Pacific. They kind of die out there and then they re-energize over the east. No big time storms just yet over the next 6 days. That's as far as we really need to go. With these weather systems, we'll go to day 7. That's fine. Yes, beyond day 5, it gets pretty murky. But over the next week, if we just rewind the clock and do it again, there is another storm system. Looks like it comes in between days 4 and 5 to the west coast of the U.S. Look at all that snow out there. High Sierra, very high snow rates, even some rain here in California, all the way down to parts of Southern California. That would be a really, really good thing. And you know what we have not heard practically anything about, which is a great thing in these last couple of months or so, no major, just nightmarish wildfire outbreaks. That's not to say there aren't any out there, but we haven't had a really bad wildfire period here over the last 30 to 60 days that I can recall. Again, there's some isolated ones, yes, but none of these big news-making events. And when you see that, some greens and blues there on the Tropical Tidbits GFS forecast, that's precip, and we need that, especially out west. So that's a good thing to see, and a good way to end today's update on quite the positive note. All right, so let's get together again on Wednesday sometime in the afternoon. We'll see how our system 99L is doing, and by that time, will it be Owen? What do you think the chances are of it becoming Owen? Leave your thoughts about that in the comments, of course, as they say. For people that do the YouTube thing, we'll talk about it in the comments. And in fact, it's very nice to see the feedback that we do get in our comments section. 99.9% very positive, so let's keep that going. What do you think? Is this going to become Owen? We shall see. All right, have a good rest of your Monday. As always, thanks for tuning in and giving me a part of your day. Always hope you learned something. I'm Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack. I'll be back with you again on Wednesday.